However, I think we are starting. It is the loss of the people who have not yet arrived, but you are almost all here already. I have a great pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, Professor of Marine Ecology from University of Tartu, Jonne Kotta. His research has extremely wide scope from both subject-wise and geographically. So subject-wise, he's been studying algae and invertebrates and has been doing spatial modeling. And geographically, he's been working with Arctics and Antarctics and Australian seas. But I think closest to his heart is still our home sea, brackish water, eutrophicated Baltic Sea with its own problems for restoration. And I think this is going to be the subject of his talk. So please, the floor is yours, Jonne.
So hello, good morning to all of you. It's like a rock concert, many of you, but much better than rock concerts. As Monty Python is saying, now it's going to be some completely different thing, so it's a science. So this keynote, I'm not so much going to concentrate on problems because we have so many crises around and we know so well about all of our problems we have, but it's more like solutions and some ideas. And it's going to be centered around the Baltic Sea. So it's trying to give you a bit of understanding what's the current state and what might be the solution for ecological improvements. So all human activities have an impact. So it can be positive, it can be negative. Mostly it's a negative from nature conservationist perspective. And here you basically have a huge diversity of pressures that human can generate in a marine environment. And what's important that pressures have become more intense and more diverse. And obviously this needs very high concern. And here you have different broad habitat types. And you can see how much impacted these habitats are. So all these columns indicate a impact severity to this. And the same for the Baltic Sea area. So the problem of the Baltic Sea is that this is having a large watershed. So lots of river coming to the Baltic Sea and only very narrow straits from the west, from the Danish straits. So the water exchange between the ocean and the Baltic Sea is extremely slow. And everything what we do within the Baltic Sea stays in the Baltic Sea, more or less. So historically, we actually had another connection from the north. And then I'd love to have this connection back because that might flush the Baltic Sea and might be the best solution for the Baltic Sea. But obviously, we can't do it because of lots of ethical reasons. And then if you are looking on the right, then you have a HELCOM assessment. HELCOM is a body that sort of coordinates all the environmental issues in the Baltic Sea region. And the colors are indicating the state of the Baltic Sea. So you can see the majority of Baltic Sea is in a very bad state. So you have only one small location here in north that is more or less okay. So, and if you put it into a detailed view, so here you have a different indicators of the water quality, so to say. Colors again indicative of it's a good or bad or what's the trend. And as you see, we have too many red dots. But fortunately, we also have some green dots. That's sort of promising. When it comes some very toxic substances, the concentration has dropped heavily, and that's thanks to the HELCOM actions with the different member states. But nevertheless, we have lots of problems, and we definitely don't want our sea to look like this. But if we don't act, so that might easily come true. So what we want to restore the system. So we want to come from the left side to the right. So when we have this ephemeral blooms of free-floating algae, so we want to turn it into a nice habitat-forming community. And then we have also HELCOM Baltic Sea Action Plan that has some environmental targets on eutrophication, biodiversity, hazardous substances, and maritime activities. And here you have lots of beautiful words, like we want for clean water, natural level of algal blooms, natural distribution, natural, etc., etc. So thriving and balanced communities of plant animals, viable populations. So we want to have all the enforcement of international regulation, no illegal discharges, all fish are safe to eat, and so on. And the million-dollar question is how? Because this is a problem of today, that policy is a bit too broad. And then the reason of a complexity is manifold. So first, it's a complex system when it comes to human activities. So on the left side here, so you have different human activities. So it can be physical restructuring, extraction of non-living resources, production energy, transport, so on. And then here you have like smaller categories, like shipping, for example, or fishing. And then each of those can generate multiple pressures. So for example, if you have shipping, so it can generate noise, pollution of nutrients, greenhouse gases, can introduce non-indigenous species. So it's very, very, very complex system, and often we don't have knowledge and data. And if you go into the ecosystem, that's a sort of similar situation. Even we all know that the Baltic Sea is simple, at least this is what textbook is saying. It's not true. Even within this simple system, you have lots of complex interactions with feedback loops, and to model and understand the dynamics, especially under the very dynamic environment we have, and lots of gradients of the Baltic Sea, this is pretty challenging. So, how to effectively bridge the gap between science and policy. So here, so we are a scientist, so we are doing lots of research, lots of detailed measurements, experiments, modeling, so on. And we tend to publish it a pretty complex format with a, so we like complexity actually. And then here we have this disconnect. So, and then if you look at the policy side, so we have a Baltic Sea Action Plan, few other things. So we want the good things, but we don't know how to do it. And the only solution to tackle this complexity of interaction, what you get in a sea, both from a human systems and a natural system, so it requires data and analysis demanding schemes. And somehow these needs to be communicated to the stakeholders. So, one of the solution. So I believe we need to build an ecological digital twin for dynamic impact assessments and mitigation strategies. I'm emphasizing here ecological, because nowadays in a European sort of space, we have lots of talks about digital twins. And if you little bit zoom in, then you realize that when it comes to the marine environment, so we talk about temperature, perhaps salinity, maybe water velocity, so all these physical side of environment. But we are interested to save the planet, biota, and there's almost nothing about biota in these digital twins to date. And so this might be our future. So, and some components what this digital twin might have. So it should tackle communities and processes, have some nice models. Also models on connectivity, very important issue, cumulative impacts, as we have a diversity of different human pressures on environment. And then on top of it, some mitigation and restoration module that can guide us how to proceed. But of course, this is not an easy task, and we're only beginning. So first, we have a problem of data. And here we have some solutions. Here, just an example of a hyperspectral imager. Even Baltic Sea visibility, it's pretty bad. It's one of the worst in a globe, actually. if you compare different seas. And in Estonia, in some most freshwater parts, I've been diving in, for example, Pärnu Bay, which is southwest Estonia. So you can go down to, it's actually a very shallow bay, 3-meter depth. Then you open your eye, then you close your eye, and you can't see the difference because it's so dark. So it's, and then using all this satellite technology might not be the best choice, but nevertheless, you can capture some important and interesting signals, which can be fed to different kinds of modeling, and then you have some ground truthing data, which is going to train the models. So this is something, but of course, besides high-speed spectral imager and all other these remote sensing technologies from the space, you have also in situ things. So you have drones and a few other things you can deploy in a marine environment as well, wisely. A second thing is knowledge, and this is even more interesting and important things. So what we have a huge amount of publications. And when I started my scientific career, I was able to read basically all scientific papers that was my subject and a little bit more. And I was even very much interested in what was being written in the past, like 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And when you had a chance, visit like a Natural History Museum in Paris, for example, because you can actually touch the books that has been published 400 years ago. So it's really interesting to check out what's people have been thinking back then. But nowadays, as we have so many scientists and the pressure to publish more and more and more has resulted in a situation you have exponential growth of scientific publications. And I think I can read only maybe 0.001% of my field papers. So I'm always questioning, am I expert anymore? So maybe it's no good. So we need some alternative solutions. And then one solution is that so we need to extract information from those papers in a numerical format, like a systematic reviews and meta-analysis are doing. So you extract not only the context, like language models, but you also look at different tables and figures to get effect sizes about combinations of different pressures, because you get lots of experiment and other interesting studies that can be used for this. And then eventually you can reach to the accumulated knowledge of response ratios of some types of human pressures on different nature assets. And you can get like a positive effects, negative effects, and this can be guided by AI. So we are actually in a process of starting it. So we already have established some good contacts with good people in this field, and we try to develop a tool that maybe in 1 or 2 years' time capable of extracting billions of paper daily, and then use it for as a modeling input. But nevertheless, we have already something what we can do already at this very day. So we have very sort of typical spatial modeling techniques what everybody is using more or less when it comes to produce some nice colorful maps. But in addition to this classical structure element, environmental training, or these prediction data sets, and then some sort of algorithm to predict the structural elements, you can also link it to some aspects of functioning, like primary production, nutrient assimilation, growth, or similar. And here you have some interesting modeling techniques, like a dynamic energy budget modeling that have been there for more than 40 years. And they are very complex, they're biophysical models. And for some reason, well, I know, because of complexity, lots of scientists are not using them. But these are very powerful to indicate all these processes. And you can put them into the spatial model to develop some interesting maps. And then you can even have alternative choices, so you don't have to concentrate on formulas. But basically, there have to be like 2 avenues. We have the experimental scientists, and we have those who are going to a field doing observations. And then there are almost no methodology to put these two fields into a single framework. And here you need some specific modeling techniques. So, for example, Bayesian methods or similar, where you can use the experimental data to train the model along with the observational data. And the beauty of it, that with experiment, you can resolve the cause-effect relationships. So, for example, if you did experiment on climate change, for example, you assess the effect of, interactive effect of changes in temperature, salinity, a few other things on the biota, and you use the results for your field data, you are able to predict the future changes more accurately. So, and then this is very good to guide our restoration efforts in a context of future management, climate change scenarios. Because, as you know, if we use like a distribution data and current day information, and we try to predict what's happening in the future, like in a climate change, so you are modeling outside of the box, and then the result is not that robust. And then the same dynamic energy budget modeling, you can also model some flows associated to different human activities. For example, if you're doing like aquaculture, like a mussel farming, for example, you can model what is a likely carbon sequestration potential of such a farm. So that's very indicative again to this management procedure. And then you have some other interesting modeling procedures that are about joint species distribution models. And then, and here you have, you can actually cover multiple different topics and themes at the same time. So you can separate the signal of environmental filtering. So basically you can ask questions, are species associated to habitat characteristics? So then you can also distinguish the signal of biotic filtering. So do species co-occur? That's the question. Then signals of response traits. So we can ask, are traits associated to habitat characteristics? And also niche conservation. So you can model if habitat association and traits are correlated with phylogeny. So all these things can put to a spatial temporal context, and then you can model all these things separately and jointly, and you can get very nice outcomes. And the challenge is that up to date, this modeling technique was sort of theoretical, because the algorithm is so demanding that if you, basically you can have 200 stations or observations and maybe 20 species, and if you had your database larger than that, you basically crashed your computer. So what we did in last 6 months, we tried to optimize the code as much as possible. So now my computer is working over 10,000 samples, and the communities are something like 100 to 200 species. So that's a great success. And you can see loads of association among different species and also in species in the environment. So it's very promising, especially if it comes to rare species and those who are very challenging, because it's always easy to model dominant and abundant species. But when it comes to this associated smaller bits, then these types of models can be very rewarding. And then looking a bit towards physical oceanography, you can put these biology models into this physical domain. So for example, you may want to integrate these three-dimensional hydrodynamics with the biological process modeling, and then you can even generate some dynamic loops between these models. So basically here you have a physical model, then here you have this biochemical model, and here you have this process-based biological model. And you can ask questions like, how many fish farms can fit to the environment without disrupting an ecosystem? So you can quantify the natural sort of carrying capacity. So now coming to a completely different topic, but nevertheless very important, is connectivity. So as the animals and plants are moving around, and this is no exception in the seas. So these need to be modeled and mapped very precisely. But nevertheless, to date, we have a diverse disconnected methods, each with unique assumptions, strengths, and weakness. So they are working on different spatial temporal scales. And here are just some examples of different connectivity methods like tagging, telemetry, chemical markers, modeling, and genetic approaches. So each are, if you look at it, so it like a Google, like a connectivity marine environment, you get, I don't know, some hundreds of thousands papers probably. But if you try to put the picture together, so it's no easy, it's almost mission impossible. And then what we need is to have a shift from a single species focus to community, meta-community, and ecosystem-based approaches. And the future direction is develop algorithms that put it all into the same framework. And here again, Bayesian methods can be very promising. So this cumulative impact model, so this is something I already a little bit touched before. So basically, we want to use AI to extract data and knowledge from relevant publication that deals about separate and cumulative or synergistic effects of different human pressures on different nature assets. Then we generate the knowledge base that goes to the matrix of knowledge. And then running these analyses, so we have lots of different dimensions. So you have impact knowledge, some from expert to data-driven. And obviously, for something like a new pressures, like a wind park we are generating nowadays in a marine environment or some other newer technologies, we might not have good knowledge about the effects. We still need experts. But we try to minimize this as much as possible. And then you have a spatial information, so you might have a limited or extensive spatial information, and depending on availability of data knowledge, you can generate maps of different detailedness. And on the right, you basically can see how this cumulative impact algorithm can work. So you have different layers of human pressures or activities, like a wind park, and here, for example, is a fish farm, and then you have different combinations of human activities in a sea space. So here we just have a wind park, here just a fish farm, and here's a combination of these two. And then you have a map of interest, of a nature asset of interest. Then you have some nice algorithm. This is basically this knowledge base we collected in a previous step. And then using some nice statistical models, you can predict what's a expected consequence. So basically, when people are doing their plans for the future, you can already test where's the wisest place to put the wind park, or what sort of combination can have a synergistic or sort of positive interactions, and avoid stupid solutions or plans. Because nowadays what's happening, at least in Estonia, maybe it's elsewhere as well, so lots of companies are put like a demand or requirements that they have to conduct all these studies. But I think as a scientist, we could pick up like the best rewarding solutions, because we know what's happening when you give the company the task. So they have different interests because they want the development to be implemented, and then they can find the arguments and so on, and so it's very painful. But if we provide them a good way forward, so that can be more beneficial. Actually, Estonian maritime spatial planning was very unique in a way that this sort of tool was used in the maritime spatial plan. So when we were picking up some interesting areas for different human actions, so it was very innovative. And then you have all this in place, so you can generate the management model. And management model should be very like a carefully built, because here, so if we look at these gradients, so it's a gradient of pressure, and on our direction, it's a restoration effort. So we never want to get into this undesired regime, because when we get into this regime, that's probably the chaos conditions. So we just fell down, and in order to restore it, it's very, very costly, if possible at all. So, and then definitely we want to have this confidence interval and precautionary buffer, because we might have some other shifts, like a climate change shifts or some, we don't know. So we have to be very careful. So basically we have to stay here, and that's a safe operating regime. And in order to establish this, you need all this huge amount of knowledge and data I explained earlier. But we shouldn't even stop here, because now I talk very much about ecology and environment, but there are many other aspects. So you have, for example, social aspects, economic aspects, and governance aspects. And as you know, so I'm an ecologist, and we don't talk too much with economists, but we should, and we should more. And to date, there are some nice tools, like LCA tool, for example, that can cover both environmental, or actually three sides, environmental, social, and economic parts, and then sort of integrate it into a single harmonized framework. But the key to those frameworks is that you should have these environmental tolerance indicators, so that indicating you no-go areas, because environment is a key. If we don't have a planet Earth, or planet Ocean actually, then we have nothing to talk about. So these have to be kept in mind. And then you have some performance indicator that tells you how far are we. And this is just an example of a thing what you can do. So you have a different topics teams. You don't want to merge them into one single indicator, because that can be not very wise, because people can interpret it in a very wrong. But you can see how far you are in different dimensions, and then set your targets. So where can you go, and how. And another thing is, like, as we observed in nowadays world, that you can't implement things if people are not happy with it. So you have to go with this to the people, and then this ecological digital twin, it can facilitate the creation of shared vision. But it's important that if you're making these sorts of meeting, then this is not just opinions and opinions, but it's a facts-based and science-driven, like a background that is used to choose a way. Because very often, and I think this is the most important mission of a science, is like we have to tell people to distinguish between facts and opinions. And nowadays it seems like people don't get the difference. And if we don't get the difference, we just fight with each other, and we never reach a solution. So we tested the methodology that is called the community of practice. So, and then there were lots of different stakeholder groups that were fighting in an area more than 10 years, I believe, maybe even 20 years. And then we try to look the problem from the other side. So we tell the people that, okay, we're forgetting who we are, just vision widely. So where you want to go in the future. And then they just like wrote some text, and then they put it together, and they all realized that they have a huge overlap of interest. And that was a good basis to move on. And even nowadays, we still have this group together, and we're trying to solve some issues and solutions. And in order to facilitate, you need the web tools. So we built some tools recently, and we now put them together in a site called Bluebio Sites. And here you have different tools that are doing cumulative impacts, but also some aquaculture-related analysis and nature conservation thing. So, for example, this Blendwise for Blue, that is about assessing a plausible consequence of different human actions on the environment, or nature assets. So here you can select the human pressures or activities of interest, and then check the different nature assets you want to have the impacts to be assessed. And then at the end, you get nice maps that show sort of before and after. So what you get, And there are many more. But obviously, this tool is, well, we're developing it. So it's, and I must say that sometimes people telling me that, so why shouldn't you have a tool that has this and that and beautiful and works and everything? And then I said, okay, if I was a Google, I had 200,000 developers. But truth is, I have 1.5. So that's the difference. But as a functioning part, so I think that's very clever. So I'm not sure any Google tool can actually do it, what we are doing. And then you have some other things, like this is a very recent thing. We saw that in our package, there is a thing called a prioritizer. And that's very beautiful and interesting thing. So we turn it to be like a functional package for a sea space. So basically, the package enables systematic design and evaluation of conservation strategies in marine environment. And as an input data, we have maps of natural assets, human pressures, predefined conservation targets, implementation costs, and then the tool identifies where you should put the conservation area. And that's really beautiful because otherwise it takes you ages to make the choice. But here it happens maybe 10 seconds. So you basically can run 200 scenarios, different types of, have a cup of coffee, and after drinking it, you have a solution ready. And then you can decide where to go and which way. So that's a beautiful thing. Okay, but so far I've been talking about models, but innovation is happening only if we have an action. So it's not only creativity, but also action. And then you combine these two things, you get an innovation. So I just want to touch very slightly two topics of or sectors in a marine space. And one is a high inertia sector, which is shipping. And then how to change this. We all think that the shipping is sort of stagnated, very strong inertia, and to induce some tangible changes in this sector is almost like it takes decades or more. But it's a very Martin Stopford, so one of the best gurus of shipping. So he said recently that in the next 20 years, the maritime industry must rebuild its cargo fleet. And this is because of all the demands we have globally, and also the technologies and the prices of fuels and a few other things. And the thing is how we do it. So, and if this is done with the radical technologies which are available now, it can lead to the biggest change in ship design since the steam replaced sail in the 19th century. So in 20 years, we might expect revolutionary things in shipping, which is something that can change a lot. And just showing you some mitigation measures, what you can do easily in shipping. So it's one easy thing is like a vessel size. You can play with the vessel size. And here you have this greenhouse gas emission target. So you can almost reach the target by playing the ship size. Then obviously biofuels can make a big game player. But that's very surprising. It's a speed optimization. So if vessels are cruising a bit slower speed, then the consumption of fuel is way lower. So, and there's an easy thing you can do without investing too much. So basically, please communicate. So the different ports should communicate to different ships and let them know that, okay, you are expected here at Perth, say tomorrow 5:10. And then ship is calculating the route, reducing the speed, and get exactly in time instead of cruising very fast and then stopping at the place. And then with this, you can almost get to 80% of reduction of emission. That's the amazing thing. And as nowadays, as fuels are becoming more expensive, then of course, this is of economy interest. And in order them to understand what's happening, you need to map. And this is another study we made recently. So we basically mapped the emission at the Port of Tallinn and related systems, and made it digital in a way that they can implement mitigation measures. And the good thing with the private industry is that they pick up the solution very fast, because this is impacting their money, and they know how to make choices fast. So, and then second, and this completely different thing, is a regenerative farming. So this is an emerging field in the Baltic Sea. So I'm talking about mussels and the seaweeds. So they are offering us ecosystem services, but so far mussel farming and the seaweed farming in Estonia or in the Baltic Sea is not that common practice. So basically what's happening here? So the Baltic Sea, due to the legacy nutrients, is full of nutrients. So we want to get rid of these nutrients, because nitrogen, phosphorus, so generating the blooms of microalgae. And the good news is with these mussels, that they are consume this phytoplankton and then making the water more clear and restoring habitats. And the same goes with seaweeds, because seaweeds are extracting directly nutrients. So we are developing different cultivation technologies, how you can still cultivate seaweeds and mussels in a low salinity areas, because we cannot copy-paste solutions from different oceans. And then we're also valorizing the products, because you have to do something with the product. So this is just an example, a very new farm. So it's an algal farm established last year, autumn. It survived severe winters, which is nice, because we had 3 days northerly winds we never experienced, I don't know, in last 100 years or so. So it survived. So you have some local species that we cultivate, some local technologies, and then you can use algae to do multiple products. And in Estonia, we actually have one good company, Estagar, who's developing, using a red algae and producing a Furcellaran, for example, but you have many more possibilities. And the same goes for mussel farming. And mussel farming is having a better potential, because mussel farms can filter. The filtering effect is so huge that what I've observed, the seagrass habitats below the mussel farm, so they are in a very good state. Whereas if you go like 200 meters away, it's already covered with overloaded seaweeds, and they are not necessarily that beautiful. And they extract lots of nutrients, and if you get these mussels from the sea, you permanently extract nutrients from the Baltic Sea system. So, and this is just an example, a little bit complicated image, but nevertheless. So here, a few years ago, we conducted monitoring at all farms, mussel farms in the Baltic Sea region, and then we wanted to know, can we use a typical Water Framework Directive monitoring design to see some positive or negative outcomes of mussel farms? And we actually did. So mussel farms had a significantly, you could see the significant effect of reducing nutrients in the water and the sediment, and then a positive effect of benthic communities. And there are another dimension of the story, because now we have a couple of invasive species in the Baltic Sea, like a mud crab and round goby. So they are decimating all our bivalves. I was diving 1 week ago in West Estonia, and I was almost, so I had to do an underwater documentary for a mussel reef. There wasn't mussel reef anymore, because round goby, like bottom was covered like hundreds of round gobies in a square meter, so like I couldn't see the bottom almost. And then there were almost no mussel left, so it's very difficult to make a nature documentary on the mussel reefs if you don't have the mussel reefs anymore. But the good news is that these round goby, they don't have a blood, how do you call this, the thing in a body that they can use to change their layer in the water. So they can't get into the water column. And the same goes for a crab. So they don't climb up high, because otherwise they're eaten easily. So mussel farms can actually serve as a reserve for mussels in case predation rates are very high. because they have very strong reproduction potential, and this can be used as a natural source of muscle in area. And then that's a good example in Sweden. They already made a plant that uses small Baltic mussels to produce mussel meal. And today this mussel meal is used for a pet food for dogs and cats. And we tested even at our home. And well, we have a Labrador, so Labrador eats all. But definitely, yeah, it was a good thing for a dog. So, and again here, like loads of different choices what you can do with the mussels, even like some oils and interesting things, protein powder and so on. All right, so I'm coming sort of to the end of the talk, a few minutes left. Coming back a little bit modeling is this IMTA farms. So in the same modeling frame I explained you earlier, you can put different aquaculture modules into it. So for example, you can have a mussel module and a seaweed module and a fish module. And then here, yeah, fish is the only aquaculture form that you have to feed and you generate problems to the sea. But macroalgae and mussels can compensate it. And there is the way you can calculate it, how much or how many mussel farms are needed to compensate the negative effects of fish farms. And you can calculate the carrying capacity at different levels. Like you can calculate the physical carrying capacity, so where to put the farms after all, so where you have a good suitable conditions for mussels. So estimate production carrying capacity, how much you can get. So this is very interesting for industry people, because they want to know how much we get eventually. And then you can estimate ecosystem carrying capacity, and that goes, you don't want to destroy your environment, because this is very, very, very vital. And we have this example now in Saaremaa, Tagalaht, where you have fish farms together with a mussel farm and algal farm, so in a sort of nice setting. And I think it's one of the first example in the world. The fish farms, the effects have been compensated almost 100%. Because normally natural or these regulations are not that harsh in many other countries. So, and this is just a modeling product, the potential for mussel farming to mitigate the negative effects of a standard fish farm. And obviously, more saltier is a region, more it can compensate. So it's you need less mussel farms in south, because you have a higher salinity and mussels grow faster and larger. So basically with these modules, you not only restore the environment, but you can also accelerate blue economy. So you have both economic benefits and you have also potential to restore the nature. And finally, that's my concluding slide. So I think there is nothing so practical as a good theory. So we shouldn't forget this, because without the theory, we cannot be what we are today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonne, for this trip through the models to the actual practical solutions. Do we have questions?
Good morning. Thank you very much. Very impressive. I have a question about the uncertainties and risk assessment, and this your model-based tools, which for the decision making. Yeah, this is a serious thing. If somebody makes a very small mistake in the measurements, the whole model is going other way.
Yes, this is a very important topic, and this is even what we have been implemented in our tools. So it's in general, as you know, we collected information from multiple studies. So, and then we used this meta-analysis approach, and with this you can extract values from different studies, and you can also get errors associated to each values, and then you put it to a global means average with a global error. So what we how we decided, because we have so many different aspects, and we don't want the tool to be complicated, because if it's complicated, people don't want to use it. It has to be simple. So from a user side, what we can do now, they have 2 maps at the sort of end page, and then they can pick up what these maps are representing. So for example, you may want that one map is a start and another is an end, but you can also have it like, okay, one map is an end and another is a errors associated to this end value. So you actually know uncertainty. And uncertainty can have like lots of reasons, and this is something we want to investigate further, because we want to know if this is a data uncertainty, is it a knowledge uncertainty, is it like a model uncertainty, you have so many more. And then we know where to invest our efforts. So should we go to the field to collect more data? Should we do some experiments? Or we should fine-tune our models? But this is very valid and important point. And even if you go like a multidisciplinary thing, like you had this socio-economic thing, we are not that far to generate uncertainty there. And, but from the natural point of view, so at least this is my field, so I'm more or less confident. But we know already how little we know, so it's another side of the story.
Do we have another question? There are 2 behind there. Yes.
Thank you. I'm following from this. You basically described the precision of your estimates in uncertainty field, but then there are different deep uncertainty cases where you can have completely different trajectories depending on particular events, right? So how have you included this? And another question is that if you are taking published data, this comes necessarily from other conditions that we are going to face in the future, which means we don't have actually that data that may be valid. So how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, again, very valid points. When it comes to a trajectory modeling, so this is something, I mean, you can do the model when you have sufficient knowledge and data, right? So, and if you don't have too rich information scenario, you pick up the, like Occam principle, you pick up the easier model, because you don't want to have it very complicated. So for those things, we don't know too much. We rather use a statistical association, and we are not talking in a dynamic perspective. But those cases like a dynamic energy budget modeling, we actually have all the cause-effect relationship resolved, and then you can generate any scenario of interest. But when it comes to another question, lots of studies with different contexts. So what we are doing, we're also extracting the covariates, because you have like a salinity condition that can definitely impact the outcomes of different pressures. You have also nutrient considerations and a few other things. So we are extracting lots of covariates, and then it's not like a typical meta-analysis. Well, it's actually meta-analysis, but it's meta-analysis associated with covariates. So, and with this approach, you can a little bit, get it more realistic. But again, you have to compare the current realism, because what's happening nowadays is that you have lots of expert panels, and people are talking, and they're talking about opinions, and you almost don't have anything like a data-driven. So, and this is sort of hybrid thing. So we try to use as much data knowledge as possible, but if we don't, we still have to rely on experts. And then experts don't know about these trajectories. I mean, real case. So it's so we try to advance it, and with the AI, I believe like in 10 years' time, we can already have like a very complex models and all this big data included. So it's, but we have to go there, and we have to dream wild.
We had some, yeah.
Marko Koff, very nice talk. Thank you. The wide scope. You showed in the very beginning and said that scientists likes complexity, but the policy doesn't. There is a disconnection border in between. But in the end, you yourself showed even more complex model. So we are getting more and complex, and you still need to tie it together with a socio-economic and those other things, social and economics. So my gut feeling would be that those three fields should have like a similar level of complexity in order to balance each other kind of way. What I see in ecology, we can go quite far in modeling and be very precise, but the economic decisions are still made in a gut feeling level. So maybe you can comment on that.
Yes, I think I wasn't too clear about it, but I don't want to, well, we cannot reduce the complexity of system below the threshold that it's not representing reality. So we want to keep this complexity because ecosystems are complex and we have to acknowledge it. But I agree that the policymakers, managers, we don't want to see all these equations. They are a little bit afraid, or maybe even more than a little bit afraid of this complexity. So you need to build a web tools. So all the complexity is happening behind the scenes, but then the data and consequences, like ecological consequences, are popping up to them. So they know that, okay, if we do that, so we get this. And then they can make the choices that are best, based on the best knowledge. But I agree that the chain is as strong as the weakest link. And then if we have a different disciplines and we resolve the ecology very nicely and the economy they don't, I still think that we have to resolve ecology very nicely because we have the only planet Earth. So we cannot sacrifice it. And then we should hope and we should give this message to the economists that please make your models more complicated. But I'm sure that the model can be very complicated. The problem is that we don't know it because we are from different disciplines. So they might suffer with similar problems. They have a huge complex models, which they don't want to show the stakeholders because stakeholders don't understand it. But it's the same issue. So we should put it in a web-based system sort of, and then join it. So I think that's the way forward.
One more question. I think there was one hand up there already before.
Yeah, thank you. I really like your solution with the mussels, but I was wondering about the connection between the sea and the land, because I missed the beginning of your talk. And of course, I would imagine that the one big lever of change would be reducing the eutrophication from, say, farming. So is that in any way included? Because that would be the biggest social lever, and of course trying to deal with the consequences with the mussels is one thing, but doing the other lever would be a much bigger change agent, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I can be fully honest here because it goes to internet. But the truth is that the problems of the Baltic Sea is not problems what happening with the sea, within the sea, but there are problems of agriculture and forestry that is happening on land. Yeah. And if you look at the HELCOM publication, 80% of nutrients that are coming into the Baltic Sea are from agriculture and forestry. And obviously, if we stop that, we have a healthy sea. But we tried hard communicating this information, and then you have some social processes, and people start fight for their rights, and nothing is happening really.
Yeah. And there's 11 countries around the.
Oh yeah.
So it's very complicated, I know.
Yes, yes, but it's eventually. I mean, we have to try hard, but it's no easy solution. So.
Thank you.
Do we have one more, or? Okay. Thank you, Jonne, so much.
Okay.